Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lawcast. This week, we're taking a trip back in time to December 2001 to discuss WWF Vengeance 2001. But first, Cuse, there's something we need to talk about.
Uh-oh, what do we need to talk about?
We didn't get to do the Lashley show.
No. Look, man, we were supposed to be doing Survivor Series. We were going to cover our very first Lashley show. You don't understand how excited I was to finally cover the man mountain that is Bobby Lashley. And unfortunately, I suffered from some, a little bit of multi-organ failure, laid up in the hospital for a little while. It's like fate denied me Lashley.
Ugh. But don't worry, we'll make up for it.
Goddamn right.
So this week, we are covering a kind of bland show from an absolutely insane time period is how I would describe it. It's the end of 2001, and I'm going to throw some Wrestling Observer headlines at you. The first one is WWF employees laid off for the first time in 8 years. That's November 19th. And 2 weeks later, WWF profits down 71%. They're just in free fall at this point. The good times are over.
That's an incredible percentage, 71%.
Yeah.
But I mean, anecdotally, like, just if you were a wrestling fan during this era, just think back to that time. Just think back to when you were in school and suddenly nobody gave a shit about wrestling overnight. Like, I remember, like, 1 year, everybody was on the bus talking about Raw, every single thing that was going on. And the next year, I had 3 wrestling friends and no one else would even talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing is, a bunch of it happened over the summer, was like the invasion, that whole thing. You came back from summer break and nobody liked wrestling anymore is essentially what happened.
It was pretty phenomenal. And it's especially funny because I got back into wrestling in like late 2000. So like I was like the kid who like missed all the fun stuff, and then it's just suddenly not cool anymore when I start liking it. Jerks.
Story of your life.
Story of my life, man.
So the invasion has come and gone. We'll cover that another time, but at Survivor Series, Team WWF won when The Rock pinned Steve Austin after Kurt Angle turned on Team Alliance. Just think about that. The great WWF WCW war came down to The Rock against Steve Austin with Kurt Angle turning on Team WCW.
We have so many axes to grind with this stupid goddamn invasion.
What they did to Kurt is one of the worst, though. Like, they had made Kurt Angle into an absolute top babyface star. When he tapped out Austin to win the title in Pittsburgh at Unforgiven, like 2 or 3 weeks after 9/11, it was one of the best moments in wrestling history and an absolute crowning moment for a top babyface. And they proceed to turn him heel and have him join the Alliance for absolutely no reason, except they couldn't come up with a 5th guy to be on Team Alliance because they had buried all of the WCW guys by that point.
Yeah, God forbid any of them. I think the Alliance team, if I remember correctly, was 3 ECW guys, 1 WCW guy, and then all WWE guys.
I mean, yeah, so Shane was on the team.
Yeah,
it was,
what was it?
Austin,
Shane, Booker,
Angle,
Austin.
Shane, Booker, Van Dam.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Absolutely. And so the night after Survivor Series is one of the weirder nights I can remember. It was kind of like one of those Vince Russo WCW Nitros where they would just, kind of hit the reset button and drop all their storylines. Over the course of literally one segment, Angle and Vince go from faces to heels. Steve Austin turns face and beats them both up, and Ric Flair debuts as the new co-owner of the WWF. This happens over the course of 10 minutes.
Because Ric Flair bought the stock.
Consortium!
Yeah, what the fuck? Please explain to me what the consortium that Ric Flair bought was.
Ric Flair was the consortium.
What is a consortium?
I don't know, and I don't think Ric Flair does either, but they had him keep saying that word. The
So
consortium
basically,
was me. It's the end of Batman Begins. Bruce Wayne bought all the shares.
so yes, I guess all of Stephanie and Shane's stock in WWE, which I guess they kept despite being rivals, he bought.
Yeah.
So he owned half of the company.
They sold it all to finance their purchases of WCW and ECW because they were worth so much.
But that means that, like, literally the entire time the invasion's going on, Rick owns half of WWE, and he's just chilling, waiting for his moment.
Yep.
Why?
I don't know. Why didn't they bring Flair in earlier during the invasion?
Hey, that's a great question.
Yeah. And I always assumed that, like, his contract expired in November or something, but it turns out it didn't. They just bought him out in a panic move because they needed somebody to be kind of the co-owner of the company to set up the roster split because they had dropped the Vince Linda divorce storyline from the summer that was going to set it up.
Man, how different is the invasion if instead of Austin heel being the leader of it, Ric Flair is?
Flair wasn't going to wrestle though, but they needed him. He should have been the lead. Like, he should have been the leader instead of Shane. Like, he would have been Team WCW's mouthpiece and manager, and that would have been great.
It would have just given it a lot of credibility and authenticity that it did not have.
Yeah, I mean, they needed a real leader, so either Flair and Bischoff or Bischoff, and then they needed Goldberg. And if they'd had that, I think they would have been okay.
Goldberg would have made everything better. He does not come until 2 years after this.
And nobody gives a shit when he does.
Nope. They actively cheer for the other guy.
Yeah. So they also turned the Undertaker heel. It's really just, I mean, it's unfortunate Kurt turned heel, but because the bad guys had been the Alliance for months at this point, all they had were faces. So they needed to do some turns. Jericho had turned heel. That was good. Kurt probably should have stayed face. Triple H was going to come back as a face. Really, they turning Rock at this point, dare I say?
I mean, I wonder how long in advance they knew they were going to do Rock Hogan. Like,
yeah, I mean, they knew that's actually the issue. Is they're either going to do Rock Hogan at WrestleMania or SummerSlam. It's either Rock or Austin is going to wrestle Hogan at WrestleMania. So, yeah, it's hard to turn Rock heel at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they can't turn Austin heel because they just did it, and it was a miserable failure, and they were never going to go do that again.
Yeah, so, Triple H is coming back as a face because he's coming back from an injury. They probably should have just brought him back as a heel. Like, all the air went out of his face run immediately out. Like, he got the comeback pop, and then that was it.
Yeah. It's just, you feel like there were so many huge stars in WWE at this time, especially with the invasion coming in. There's so many people there. But honestly, there aren't very many bankable top guys around because they fucked them all over so badly during the course of this year that really, like, I think it would be very difficult to say who the top guy even was.
No, because they're just jerking them all around, and Rock's in and out. Austin's a shell of himself, both kind of physically and mentally at this point. And part of what I think they suffer from here is just no one's rising because Jericho's getting a push, but there's just no room for anyone to rise. They've got all their stars. It's kind of the same problem WCW had in the late 90s. Things got stale, but there's no room to move anybody up.
Because in order to move them up, you got to move them down. Russo went and tried to knock all the old guys down, and that you saw the mess that created.
Yeah. So where we are coming into this show, Austin is the WWF champion. Rock is the WCW champion, but I think they just call it the world title on this show.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when that change took place.
I think it was just after the invasion because WCW is dead. But yeah, they're just calling it the world title. That title has a fun history of being called weird things because it was also the WCW International Heavyweight Championship at one point. and at one point just called the Big Gold Belt in
The
WCW.
big gold belt.
Because they had lost, the NWA had backed out, but they still had the physical title and hadn't decided what to do with it yet.
The big gold belt.
Everybody knows what it is.
Something delightfully Southern about that to me.
They decide, let's just like get rid of this thing, which honestly isn't the worst call. So kind of unceremoniously, they're going to unify the titles. Ironically, they would do this again 12 years after this at TLC 2013.
Which also felt completely out of nowhere.
Yeah, very unceremoniously just decided we're only going to have one title from now on. There's just a tortured history with this. You know, they pulled it less than a year after this, they pulled the big gold belt back out of a briefcase and hand it to Triple H because they decided we need two belts again.
I almost feel like during this period, Vince doesn't know what he wants. Like it definitely feels like he's just being pulled in so many different directions. There's so many options. And like, I almost feel for Vince on some level because it's just too much.
Oh, yeah.
There's too much going on. There's too many people. There's too many decisions to be made. Suddenly your main event's falling apart. You have 5,000 people on the roster who all want to push. You're trying to figure out how to make all this bullshit work. And now you got to push all these titles together and shit. So he's just like, fuck it. Let's just have a tournament. I guess we'll just, Jericho's getting a push. It's his turn. Let's go. Like, it's every decision made basically from here until the brand split feels that way. Until he finally says, like, all right, the brand split, that's what I want. We're doing it.
And the first 6 months of the brand split were completely insane.
Yeah. But at least, like, there's clarity there. Up until that point, it's just chaos. Yeah.
I mean, you've got too many big stars. Like, you've got no clear plan here. You have at least two top guys in Rock and Austin. Plus, you've got Triple H coming back from injury, and he's going to be a top guy when he comes back. So you've got three, and then you've got Hogan coming in, and what are you going to do with him?
I don't think that's how we say it. I think we say, what you gonna do when the Hulkster comes back to the WWE, brother?
They really didn't know.
They had no idea. You're gonna job him out to the Rock, brother.
But the fans are gonna cheer him because it's Toronto and that's the Hulkster's town.
I wonder how pissed Vince was when they did that. Just like, God damn it, I'm trying to get some revenge on him.
Yeah, he outworked Rock so bad in that match.
Oh my God, he stole it. He stole it like a thief.
That match is proof of how good Hulk Hogan is. Because, the fans were inclined to cheer him anyway, but he's so sympathetic in that match.
He just, like, I've never seen it. I mean, we'll do that show one day and we'll talk more in depth about it, but I've never seen a performance
it's the
like
same
that
thing he did to the Warrior at WrestleMania 6.
Yep. Like, hey, you're going to win.
Yeah,
you're going to win, but this is about me.
Yeah, but all anybody's going to remember is how magnanimous I was in defeat.
Oh my God, what a brilliant con man racist he is.
Okay, so getting into the show, it's Sunday, December 9th, 2001. We're at the San Diego Sports Arena in San Diego, California. About 12,000 people in attendance, not sold out. The show does 315,000 buys, which is way down from the previous year's December pay-per-view. But that was the six-man Hell in a Cell, so I don't think it's a fair comparison. But it's also down from Armageddon 99, where the main event was Triple H versus Vince. It just kind of speaks to the strength of the product relatively, that 2 years before this, they're drawing with Vince in the main event. And here, they're not drawing for the title unification and potentially Rock versus Austin.
Just think about what this pay-per-view represents. It's not just about Rock versus Austin. It's not just about the people involved. It's not even about the storylines. They are about to unify the WWF and NWA World Championships. This is an 80-year storyline that they are about to pay off randomly at Vengeance, and they can't draw as much as Triple H versus Vince.
So that TLC show where they unified the belts, Triple H came out and did this really good promo where he talked about the history of both belts and how they've always been separate since what is it, like Eduardo Cartier pinned Buddy Rogers or whatever, one fall match. That was great, except it wasn't true because these belts were unified here. Here, they're actually doing it for all intents and purposes. It's not really the NWA title, but it might as well be. They own the footage, they own the history, and nobody really cares.
No, nobody gives a shit because they've never assigned any value to that title. Like, they didn't make it seem like a big deal. None of the storyline coming into this is about the title unification. Nobody cares about that. Literally, the big storyline coming into this is Vince getting his head shoved into Rikishi's ass.
Well, there's nothing better than asses. People love asses.
Also, that's the greatest GIF on the entire internet. I welcome you to go search for it right now.
Oh, man. So on Heat, the APA defeated Billy and Chuck in 6 minutes and 20 seconds. Think cool. I can live with missing that one?
Yeah, sure.
So we open the show with the weirdest and worst video package I've ever seen. A film by Freddie Fellini. Who the fuck is Freddie Fellini?
I don't know who Freddie Fellini is. I was a film student. I don't remember Fellini having a brother.
What? Do you have any idea, like, what is that? Like, what are they referring to when they say that?
Oh, they're referring to, like, Federico Fellini, the famous Italian surrealist filmmaker. But I think Freddie was supposed to be Freddie Blassie, so they just combined the two together. So, like, this is the kind of, like, it's at least vaguely the kind of surrealist stuff that Fellini would do in his movies. And Fellini was a genius, don't get me wrong. This was just some hot garbage bullshit.
Did anyone watching this show understand what this was supposed to be?
No, of course not.
Even if they did, like, what was supposed to be good about this?
It's literally like, okay, like a song that would be universally familiar to everybody.
Yeah, the circus song.
Yeah, and for like Looney Tunes or the circus or whatever.
That.
Yes, and it's playing over, like, there are clips of Jericho, Austin, and Rock, and there's also clips of, like, old school guys, though almost no NWA guys, just Ric Flair. Like, it's mostly, like, Buddy Rogers and Bob Backlund and guys like that. Yeah. But they're talking about the title and how important it is. Meanwhile, Freddie Blassie is sitting in a room where, like, just weird shit's going on all around him. Like, there's, like, clowns juggling on top of each other in the corner, and there's a man sneaking up on him about to kill him, but then he disappears. Weird garbage.
Like, I don't think a video package has ever written itself more than this one, because it's just clips of all the champions.
Yeah, and yet, this is okay. Dave Sahadi has made some unbelievably amazing video packages, and I don't know for certain that he was a part of this one, but every once in a while, and this was especially true in TNA where he had, like, ultimate power to do whatever he wanted, he would make some truly baffling nonsense. Because he was just trying to go out there and create video packages that were interesting. And man, sometimes
it doesn't have to be complicated. Like, This is just show us all the champions, show us Hogan, show us Backlund, Sammartino, Flair, Dusty, Sting. Even though you don't have these guys, they still held this belt. These belts.
It's actually maybe like the best possible thing they could do is, in New Japan, if anybody's super familiar with New Japan, before they do the IWGP Heavyweight Championship match, they show a picture of everyone who ever held that belt.
That's cool.
Yeah. They literally, every single person, the lineage, all the way up to now. And it's awesome because it's just like, this is important. These are all the people. A million people have held these belts.
Yeah. And you can do it when you don't change the belt every 2 months.
Exactly. Like, it's only like 20 people, so it's not that hard. Here, it's going to be like 100 each. Yeah. But still, even so, like, it's just something like that would just be like, man, these two belts are important. We're going to push them together. These big stars are competing for them. Hey, why is that clown about to murder Freddie Blassie?
Oh, man. I remember as a young fan being so confused by Freddie Blassie. Blassie because I knew enough about wrestling history to be like, well, he wasn't really like he was never the world champion. Like, why are they using him so much in this role? Like,
I can't
during the
decide.
invasion, they used him like he was San Martino. It was like this is like the grizzled veteran, our top guy, but he wasn't.
Yeah, he was just like the venerable old man of wrestling, but he was only ever in videos. Like you never actually saw him.
No,
that
he
was
did that
weird
one
thing.
great thing where he gave the speech right before Austin came back. He gives the speech to fire up the locker room where like they bring him in the wheelchair and he gets out of the wheelchair and he's like, stand up and fight.
That was pretty fucking awesome, actually.
It was. I mean, we'll talk about it another time, but the old Stone Cold coming back is probably my favorite angle in history.
And it almost was cool, and then they fucked it. But
it almost saved the company.
But yeah, so like every once in a while you just see Freddie Blassie show up. And I think the last time they did it was that the history of WWE video, which was actually cool that they did to the Kid Rock
that was
song.
Only a couple months after this.
Yeah, the one that made Vince actually cry.
Yeah. That was a good one. So Vince is out first here to complain about the fact that Rock shoved his face into Rikishi's ass on SmackDown.
It's a fair complaint.
Yeah, I'd be pretty hot about that if that happened to me.
Now, let the record show that he's not just complaining about that. He's also complaining, I guess Austin came on the screen and was like, he beat up Kurt Angle, and he was like, I'm going to beat your ass. So he had to stay. And then The Rock shoved the head in the ass. So Vince has an axe to grind against both Austin and Rock now.
Yeah, this is very much, I mean, it's good that they had this here because neither of us would have remembered that happened.
Not even close.
It's a good example of like how they write the show for somebody who's never watched before, which is an odd thing to do on a pay-per-view where only your most hardcore audience is watching, at least in theory.
But it is good for posterity like this. Like there are too many pay-per-views where we go back and we watch them and we have no idea what the context around them is because you'd have to watch so much TV just to know what the fuck. And they never explain anything.
Yeah. And then Flair comes out and he's just like, the show's going to start now. You're done.
But like, he's just like, you're done talking. The show's about to start. And for your punishment, here comes Too Cool.
Ooh, hard to deal with that. Yeah. So the opening match is Scotty, Hotty, and Albert against Test and Christian. Do you remember that this summer Albert was getting a huge push?
As the hip-hop hippo, yes, I do.
Well, no, before that. He beat Kane clean for the Intercontinental title.
Well,
and then they gave up on it after about 3 weeks.
It was always interesting to me, actually, because Albert had some fans among the road agents because he always did what they said. He improved by leaps and bounds. He really did. Like, he was a pretty solid worker, honestly.
It's surprising to me he never got over in the WWF because he's huge, has a really unique look, and he could work, and he was really athletic. I mean, the promo and the characters never really got there.
Yeah, but I think like Finley was like his biggest fan in the entire world. So he was always pushing for him.
And now he's one of the 10 most powerful people in wrestling as the head trainer at NXT.
I wonder how many people really have that process, that he's the head trainer of all of these awesome people coming out. Like he and Sarah Del Rey are the reason that all this talent is being produced. It's ridiculous. Thank God they got rid of fucking, what's his name? Bill DeMott?
Bill DeMott? Yeah, fucking sociopath.
Yep.
So Christian is the European champion, if anyone happens to care. He turned on Edge. At last, he's on his own.
And I'm so fascinated by Test. At Survivor Series, they had an immunity battle royal.
Great idea.
So
they could have done so much with this.
Yes, Test cannot be fired for an entire year. They do nothing with this, which is a shame because Test literally could have fucked Linda McMahon and punched Vince in the face, and nothing could have happened.
Everybody beat up Vince in this era, though. Nobody ever got fired for beating up Vince.
He could have beat up Linda. He could have pissed on WWE headquarters.
I mean, he does get really creepy and rapey with Trish later on.
Yeah, he basically uses this to become a rapist. which
I mean is probably what would actually happen in the real world if we're being honest.
Unfortunately, yeah.
You can tell 2017 has really broken us.
Oh my god.
Um, it's not a bad match, but it's kind of basic. Too cool is always going to be over. Everybody always loves the worm. Albert's fun in this dancing bear role, but I think he was capable of a lot more.
I agree. I just always felt bad for Scotty because he just got hot-shotted tag team partners so often. Like, if only Brian Christopher weren't such a goddamn mess. Like, they could have probably done more than they did.
I mean, if they'd had a real cruiserweight division back then, he would have, I think, been perfect for it. Him and Dean Malenko had that one amazing match at Backlash 2000.
Absolutely.
It was like, wow, he can actually wrestle. The pop for the worm is still enormous. Christian gets hit with the Baldo bomb and pinned. Perfectly fine opener.
I do love the Baldo bomb, though. Like, that's one of those finishers that I was always like, man, this is way cooler than people seem to think it is.
Bad name, but yeah, love the finish. Next up, we got the Intercontinental title. Edge defending against William Regal. Edge beat Test at Survivor Series to unify the Intercontinental title and the U.S. title. This feud, I remember seeming like it just went on for months and months.
Regal and Edge, or Edge and Test?
Regal and Edge.
Yeah. Basically, what would happen is they would get a promising babyface. They give him the Intercontinental title, and then William Regal would just feud with him at some point. That seemed like it happened at like 3 WrestleManias in a row.
This is Brass Knucks Regal, which I always loved.
I gotta say, like, there are a lot of people who absolutely worship the ground that William Regal walks on, and I have become one of those people over time. During this era, though, there's just something wrong. And I don't know if it's just because William Regal is working a style that it doesn't seem like anybody he's wrestling knows how to work.
Nobody else is allowed to work a foreign style in the WWF at this point except for Regal. They just let him do his thing, but everybody else has to work the WWF match.
Yeah, so it always seems kind of clunky, not because like anybody is doing anything awkward or there's bad chemistry or whatever. It's just like nobody does methodical pace during this era. Everybody's just batshit balls to the wall. We got 6 minutes. Let's do this. And Regal's just working a Regal match. It just always felt weird and out of place during this era.
Yeah. The referee's looking for the Knucks. Can't find him. Dumb referee. Where'd he pull him from? Were they in his trunks or his boots here?
I think they were in his trunks.
Yeah, well, you're not going to reach down there. Regal hit a double power bomb here, which I was kind of shocked to see him do on a guy Edge's size.
It was awesome, though.
Yeah. Edge hit a super Frankensteiner, missed the spear into the steps. I liked this. I thought this was some good stuff.
Absolutely. It's so blatantly obvious during this point that like Edge is a star. Like he needs the super push. But it's just another one of those things like, but there's 50 guys ahead of him. So what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, this is why they had to split the rosters. And then he got the push, but he got hurt.
But it's just so funny that like Edge is like 20th down the food chain, but there's like nobody on the roster today with such obvious superstar potential as this. But back then it was just like, well, whatever. You're just 1 in 50. Like we have a lot of guys with that.
Yeah, they had just such a wealth of talent that in any other era, they'd have just been strapping the rocket to him at this point.
Also, his abs are not natural. Like when we found out he was on steroids later, I was like, oh, good, because nobody's in that kind of shape. That's fucking ridiculous. He looks ridiculous.
You seen Shawn Michaels' abs lately?
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Starting to wonder what's going on with him. Starting to feel like HBK might be getting back in the ring.
Hey, HBK and that HGH, they go together.
There's a backstage segment with Flair and Kurt that doesn't really serve any purpose other than, I think, to get them on screen together.
Yeah, nothing to really say about it.
Lita's backstage stretching in her referee gear. Comes up to talk to her and tries to manipulate her into calling the match for him. Because up next, we've got Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy with Lita as the referee. What were they doing breaking up the Hardys at this point?
One of the weird subplots of the entire like Invasion summer is that they just kind of started breaking up all the tag teams. And it was kind of odd to see them do it. Like Edge and Christian happens like sort of during the front half of the Invasion. And then towards the back half, they break up Matt and Jeff. I'm not sure what the idea was, except that I think they were just like, look, Jeff Hardy and Edge are giant stars. Let's separate them from Christian and Matt and just get them being stars.
Yeah, but there's no room to push anybody at this point. This would have
Exactly.
been a perfect time just to roll with a really deep tag division. Like, you're never going to run out of good. People were always going to want to see the Hardys and the Dudleys and Edge and Christian. They could have done that a bunch more times.
Absolutely. But for some reason, it's like Vince just became obsessed with breaking these teams up. Like when the brand split happens, he's going to split up the Dudley Boys. Like no tag team from like 2000 is going to survive into 2003. And it's just very, very odd.
No, Vince hates tag teams. Doesn't want to have to pay 4 guys when he can pay 2.
I guess that's a good point. And like, but despite the fact that Jeff Hardy's obviously the star they want to push, like this storyline is totally built around Matt Hardy.
Yeah.
Totally.
So Matt is mad at Jeff because Jeff went for a swanton bomb off the cage at Survivor Series and it cost them the tag titles. And I gotta say, Matt's got a point.
Oh yeah, Jeff was a fucking idiot. Like he was almost out of the cage, and then he's like, "Oh, there's a guy on a table down there. Fuck it, let's jump."
Yeah, they did this with Cody and Goldust one time to set up a feud that never happened.
Yep, they sure did.
No reason to be splitting them up. This is a pretty bad match, I thought. I didn't feel like they had much of any chemistry.
They try this probably 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And it never works. Like these guys do not work well together. I don't know what it is. I mean, eventually when the Broken Hardy thing started, that was pretty good. But like these guys just don't have good normal wrestling chemistry. It just doesn't exist between them.
Yeah, they're doing just like mat wrestling because they're not far enough along in their split to be actually fighting each other yet. That doesn't make sense that they'd actually be getting at it yet.
And there's like nothing on the line. Like if this was just like, hey, one of them has a title and the other one wants it, so they're going to have a friendly match, but Matt's going to be a dick about it. Okay, but there's nothing on the line here to make them be fighting. So it's just weird.
Yeah, Matt goes for a super twist of fate. Jeff throws him off, hits the swanton bomb. Matt gets his foot on the rope, but Lita doesn't see it, and Jeff wins. And they just ended up dropping this program after this.
Yeah, what did they wind up doing with the two of them? Are they just like off TV for a while?
No, they team up. They're like is this the Rumble where they're the first 2 guys in? That might have been 2000. That might have been 2000. I think that was actually 2001. But they're at WrestleMania. They're just in a 4-way tag title match, and then they split them up in the brand split.
Yeah, it wound up being the best thing for both of them. But this was not the way.
No. Backstage, Trish goes to talk to The Rock, compliments him on shoving Vince's face into Rikishi's ass, and kisses him on the cheek because we should actually hate The Rock because he gets everything.
Let the record show that they spend at least 5 or 6 random segments over the course of this year kind of hinting at The Rock and Trish.
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever meant to go anywhere with it, but like it was clear that there was something there.
Why would you put The Rock with a hot woman?
I mean, I don't know.
Well, yeah, it's just like, what purpose would that serve other than making us hate him?
I mean,
like Mark Nero having Sable as his manager.
Yeah, and I mean, Trish Stratus during this time, if you were not a fan of wrestling during this era, you might not understand this. There has never been a woman worshipped quite on this level, maybe. I mean, maybe Sunny or Sable at their peak, but like Trish could actually work. Like it was a thing.
Yeah. never ends up going anywhere, and that's probably for the best.
Because Vince swoops in and takes her.
Yeah, that already happened.
Oh, it already happened?
Yeah, that happened the year before that. Well, the beginning of this year was, yeah, that was the super gross Vince Trish affair.
Let's never
one of the worst things they ever did.
Let's make a pact to never cover the barking like a dog segment, because I don't want this show to ever be that negative.
When Wnba ran for the U.S. Senate, that was literally used as an attack ad against her.
And it should.
Yeah, that was disgusting, despicable, never should have made air. Oh. And, like, I'm sure it was Vince's idea, but everyone else should have talked him out of it.
Ugh.
Next up, not quite despicable, but getting there. We've got the Dudley Boys against Kane and the Big Show for the tag titles. How many different iterations of the Kane Big Show tag team were there?
Gosh, it's got to be like 20. Like, the most memorable one was probably in what, like 06, when they were feuding with like Carlito and Masters.
Yeah, the May 19th thing.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That's the only time I remember actually enjoying it.
It seems like every like 2 or 3 years they decide to put them together. It wouldn't shock me if it happened again in the next year.
And it's the same thing that they wound up doing later with Big Show and Mark Henry. It's just like, hey, we got a couple monsters not doing shit. I guess they're a team now.
Yeah, I have no idea what led to them teaming up at this point.
They were both just chilling, so why not?
Kane had lost Undertaker because Undertaker turned heel and didn't want to hang out with him anymore, so Big Show was his rebound.
Big Show, you know what it's like to not be able to team with Undertaker anymore. Let's be a team.
Yeah, Big Show never got over the Undertaker leaving him out in the desert. Is this the worst Big Show ever looked?
Yes. No. The worst Big Show ever looked was at the 2000 Royal Rumble, where he's wearing the weird half shirt and he's got the mullet. That's the worst. This is the second worst.
He's in a Taz singlet, and it looks like the size Taz should be wearing too.
It looks like Taz is snuck in the crotch of his singlets.
It's passive aggressive, really.
It is ridiculous. Yeah. It has to hurt him to be wearing this.
I think he goes in the Alex Wright Hall of Fame.
Oh my God.
Or is the Rene Dupree Hall of Fame? I'm going to have to think about that.
Yeah, it's a good point.
This is when the Dudleys have Stacy Keibler managing them, which I loved. I mean,
the Duchess of Dudleyville.
Everything with Stacy's great, but holy shit, Stacy Keibler, like in the Dudley, like camo, the skirt, the glasses. Oh boy.
It's probably the most sense Stacy Keibler being on the show's ever made, because she was never really attached to anyone, except for when she became Test's executive manager and created the testicles.
Yeah, or when Russo impregnated her.
That too. Great. And she
did that actually happen, or did I make that up?
I don't remember who impregnated her. I do remember she had a miscarriage during a mud wrestling match. I do remember that.
Yep. In very good taste.
Yeah, awesome. Wrestling's cool, guys.
Kane's boots fall off. Did you notice this?
Yeah. Like,
he forgot to zip his boots.
I've never seen that before in my entire life. Like, they just fall off.
And sadly, the lifts didn't fall out, and we could see that he's actually 6'2". Big Show and Kane dominate. Stacy gets into the ring some reason. Big Show pulls him over his knee, yanks her skirt down, and spanks her because sexual assault is great.
There was a time in the company.
They did this spot all the time with her.
Yeah. Stacy Keibler's entire job in the company was to be sexually assaulted by people. Yeah. Every fucking night. It was bizarre.
I guarantee you they were doing this at every house show. This was definitely going to pop on the house show circuit.
And I mean, like, more power to her if that's what she wanted to do and she was fine with it. But, like, what a fucking message to send. Jesus.
That distraction allows the Dudleys to take over. They work on Kane. Hot tag to Big Show. He gets distracted by Stacy. Dropped on an exposed turnbuckle and pinned. God, the Big Show is terrible.
Yeah, this match sucks. Is this before or after Big Show gets sent to OVW?
After,
Oh.
he came back. Rumble '01 was when he came back.
I think he gets sent down again because or at least he's taken off camera for a long time.
He's not at WrestleMania. This is the WrestleMania where he's at WWF New York.
Yeah. So it's not until 2003 where he comes back on SmackDown with the new look and feuds with Brock that he finally starts to get his shit together. But like Big Show during this era is like the worst worker on the roster. He fucking sucks.
They would have fired him if they weren't paying him so much money.
Exactly. And it's just such a shame because he's so big and they can't figure it out.
He can't figure it out. He's terrible.
Yeah, that's true.
Next up, we're on to something much better. Rob Van Dam defending the hardcore title against The Undertaker.
So cool.
Oh, this is great. Taker turned heel after the invasion. Kind of nonsensically. They were doing Vince McMahon Kiss My Ass Club. JR was going to have to kiss Vince's ass. He wasn't going to do it. Undertaker came out and he was like, "Nobody kisses Vince's ass more than me. You think you're better than me, boy?" What? I remember watching that segment and just coming away from it more confused than I think I had ever been.
Which is so funny because from that nonsensical start, we got Respect Undertaker, which is one of the great characters of this era.
Oh, such a great heel run he has here. It doesn't last as long as it should have.
But like, yeah, the idea that he's just like, "I'm the fucking Undertaker, respect me." And people are like, no.
Basically the real him.
Yeah. And it's just like
locker room leader, the judge in wrestler's court.
It's just one of those things where it's just like, well, yeah, you fucking should respect him. And he just starts feuding with all the young guys, which is such a great role for him because like the main event doesn't need him.
No.
And like
he puts over a lot of people.
And the idea of him being in a hardcore match is awesome.
Oh, this match is so much fun. Like, yeah, you got Van Dam who's on fire, and they could have just put the big belt on Van Dam here, and I think everybody would have been cool with that. He's gotten hot at this point.
If he had won that triple threat at No Mercy against Austin and Angle, like, how is history different? Like, that's what people wanted badly. They wanted it bad.
Van Dam in this era was the guy who, whenever he would lose a match or even like sell for somebody, the internet would flip out.
Yeah, it was just like, what the fuck? This is bullshit. Rob Van Dam is the greatest of all time.
Why does Triple H hate Van Dam?
Like, literally, he could do no wrong. Like, he would step on screen and he was getting like Austin pops. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, to the point they were editing it on SmackDown because he was still technically supposed to be a heel.
Which didn't even make fucking sense, but whatever.
So they fight out of the ring, they fight into the crowd. Van Dam does a plancha off the tunnel. They land on sandbags. Van Dam breathes in some of the sand and clearly chokes on it.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Taker goes for the last ride, but Van Dam climbs up the stage to get away from him. Jumps off the stage, rolling thunder on the stage. Van Dam goes for the Van Daminator. Taker ducks it, chokeslams him off the stage through a table, and gets the pin. I loved this. This was so cool to see The Undertaker in a hardcore title match.
Literally, like, you'd never seen The Undertaker in a match like this. And it's really a shame. They never go back to RVD Taker, I don't think. Like, I don't think they ever had another match together.
Maybe on TV. I don't really remember what ended up happening with Taker being hardcore. I don't remember who he lost the hardcore title to.
I don't really remember either. But, like, it's just a shame because, like, this felt special and different. Like, you have Taker, who's just, like, this familiar entity, and then here's RVD doing all this weird, crazy new stuff with all of Taker's famous moves. Like, it feels fresh and interesting and cool. And, like, the whole match takes place on the stage. Like, I've never seen a match like that.
this was how they transitioned out of the 24/7 hardcore rule because everyone was too afraid of Undertaker to challenge him.
Which is genius.
Yes.
I just love the idea of Taker like sitting in his locker room.
This was my favorite match on the show. I like this more than any of the main events.
Oh, absolutely, no question. And I just love the idea of Taker just sitting in his locker room, taping up his fist, like, "Come on, Crash Holly, let's go."
Just begging somebody to come fight him. Backstage, Jericho yells at Flair about something. None of these segments led anywhere.
Nope.
This is just what they did at this time. We do lots of backstage segments, and we've got Ric Flair, so let's get him on screen with everybody.
Yep.
Next up for the women's title, Trish defending against Jacqueline. This title disappeared in the spring when Chyna left the company while still champion. It was reactivated at Survivor Series with a six-pack challenge, which was won by Trish. And I remember that being almost like a special moment in a way that was kind of odd because it's not like she had been around a super long time, but it was like the first "you deserve it" moment.
Right. And like Trish is a genuinely inspirational story. Like in a time where there was no reward for learning how to wrestle if you were a woman. Like there was no system set up to teach you how to wrestle. They didn't expect you to. They didn't even particularly want you to. Trish basically begged people to train her how to actually wrestle and wound up becoming genuinely great at it. And like the entire women's division that existed for the next decade is based entirely on the fact that Trish became good and was Trish. Like it's incredible.
Yeah. And just to refute something, what did Trish Stratus do before she was a wrestler? She was a model.
A fitness model.
Yep. So nothing wrong with models.
Nope.
This match is...
well, they gave him 3 minutes, so I mean...
Trish wins with a backslide. There's no feud here. I think they're both faces. I think they shook hands afterwards. Fuck that.
Yeah, this is just the beginning of like Trish begs for just give us 3 minutes on pay-per-view, come on. And just the beginning of the ridiculous fight that she and the other girls had to go through just to get on TV in actual matches. Like not
a couple years after this, they're having hardcore matches, cage matches, kind of some forgotten classics.
Yeah, eventually, like Victoria and Jazz will come in, other people who can actually work, and then it'll become a thing.
Yeah. Next, they replay the entire segment where Vince gets his ass shoved in Rikishi's face.
This is my second favorite part of the show, is watching this.
A lot of time on this. Who he brought out? So who all came out here? So Trish came out, and Vince wanted to kiss her ass, and Rock called him a sick freak. Jim Ross came out and got to like shake his ass and tease that Vince was going to have to kiss it. Didn't happen, and then he brought out Rikishi.
Now, we all know that Vince McMahon has some of the best facial expressions in the history of humanity. We all know this.
Yes. This was some of his finest work.
The look on his face when Trish's music hits, and then the look on his face when Rikishi's music hits, is some of the funniest shit I've ever seen in my entire life. And Vince McMahon deserves a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame for this facial acting.
Yeah, this segment was genuinely hilarious.
Yes, it's genius. The fact that it was the impetus behind everything that we're about to see in the main event of this pay-per-view isn't great.
No,
but it's still
not great.
It's a hilarious television segment.
Rikishi is at WWF New York. I'm so into these WWF New York segments because they're so terrible.
Like it's such a consolation prize for these guys. Like,
yeah.
Hey, you're the most important person not on the show. Go to the restaurant and pretend to be excited.
Eat the terrible food, hang out with marks, and I mean, we'll put you up in a New York hotel for the night. So there's that.
I also love that idea that like they're in San Diego, but they sent Rikishi to New York just to be at this stupid ass restaurant.
This restaurant that they blew millions of dollars on. Literally millions of dollars they sunk into this.
It's just so stupid, man.
Colossal failure. We could do this wouldn't. This would be crazy. We could do an entire episode on WWF New York. I can't believe they thought this was a good idea.
Just nothing in
Did
Times
Vince
Square.
once eat at the Hard Rock Cafe and enjoy it? Is he the only person who liked Planet Hollywood?
I feel like he went to a Planet Hollywood and was like, I can do this better. This is bullshit.
Yeah, I remember when I ate Planet Hollywood as an 8-year-old, I loved it. And I guess the truth is Vince McMahon is really just an 8-year-old, and that's part of his genius. But here, those instincts led him astray.
Yeah. Like, there are no successes in Times Square. Everything eventually goes out of business because the rent is impossible. And this was not a smart business to begin with.
No, restaurants all fail too.
They should have just bulldozed the Manhattan Center and put a restaurant there.
So next up, we've got Steve Austin defending the WWF Championship against Kurt Angle. These two guys had some amazing matches this year, but this is not one of them.
Nope. Because they're just backwards. Like, Angle, all of their great matches took place with Angle as a face and Austin as a heel. And Angle's the only face who can make Austin as a heel work.
That match at SummerSlam blew my mind when I saw it.
It still does.
At that point, that was probably the best match I had ever seen.
Yeah. I mean, we're like, Austin as a heel was a thing that was a failure. But that match is the crowning glory of that heel run. Because for some reason, Angle was the only person who could make Austin as a heel make sense, could make it work, that the fans would get behind instead of just cheering for Austin anyway. And it was genius.
That's just how hot Kurt was as a face. He was so lovable and dorky and innocent, but he could also kick ass.
And it was such a great time to be the American hero. It just really was.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of, after a very cynical era, after 9/11, people are very much ready to kind of be non-ironically patriotic. And Kurt is right there for that.
For about a month.
And then they turned him into a heel.
Yeah.
And had him lose the title 2 weeks after he won it. They don't. It takes a while for them to really get going here. Austin, I think, just didn't give a shit. I mean, all of Austin's matches for the next until he walks out. I think all of his matches sucked.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I will say the
garbage match against Jericho at No Way Out, the Hall match at WrestleMania, he just didn't care.
Also, Austin and Jericho just, if you were making a list of people who should have good matches but just don't have chemistry, like they're going to be really high up on it.
I think Jericho's going to have a lot of appearances on that list for some reason.
Yeah, he just doesn't quite work with some people, though there are a few people that he works with better than anybody else does. So it's just, I guess it's just one of those things.
Kurt just starts going through his stuff. Ankle lock, figure 4 around the ring post, which was cool. He misses the moonsault. Rolling German suplexes from Austin. He's stealing that move from Angle. Angle stole it from Chris Benoit, and I was always perplexed that they let him do that.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was actually kind of a funny callback because earlier in this year, when he was feuding with Chris Benoit, like Austin and he had a match on SmackDown, which is one of the coolest fucking matches I've ever seen in my entire life. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And
I
so,
know
like,
this match.
The German suplexes became like a big deal for Austin during that period. Like, he started doing them. He kind of stopped after the feud ended, but it was kind of like a cool callback to that.
That's the match where Benoit does 10 straight German suplexes to Austin, which is amazing to watch.
And it's a bigger pop for everyone. Like, it was humongous, like way bigger than the Suplex City nonsense.
Angle slam out of nowhere, but Austin kicks out. Angle goes for a stunner. Austin blocks it. Austin hits the stunner for the win. Flat. Just didn't get going.
Yeah. That is a cool... This was the year of everyone stealing each other's finisher in the main event. And that, like, I kind of missed that. Like, that was like a cool touch during this period, is everyone tried to hit the stunner on Austin.
Yeah, well, and Jericho has to do it because Jericho doesn't have a finisher. We'll talk about that in a second. But Jericho's trying to do the fucking stroke as his finisher at this point.
Oh my god, the fucking breakdown. Oh,
Oh,
it's
it took
horrible.
Jericho so long to find a finisher.
But like the problem is that no person has ever had their finishers killed more than Chris Jericho. Like from the time he enters the WWF until now, like no, his two finishers are the least credible things in the entire company.
To this day, has he ever beaten anyone with either the Walls of Jericho or the Lion Salt?
I swear, like every couple of months, he would beat somebody definitively with the Walls of Jericho just to be like, it's a real finish, guys.
Yeah,
And then no, after that, everyone would just get out of it. The only time he ever beat
never
anyone with the
tapped out of
Lions,
it.
yeah, the only time he ever beat anyone with the Lion Salt was Triple H on Raw that one random
It
time
was a fast
with the
count,
fast
damn it.
count.
You know it.
God,
Hebner screwed him.
if only he had had the code breaker here, you know?
What could have been different? I remember when he started doing that, it was like, oh my god, he finally found a finisher.
Because the fucking break, he does the worst version of the stroke imaginable. And like, that includes Jeff Jarrett, who does
It's just kind of, it's a bad, clunky move in general. The Miz's version of it
it's
never
amazing
looks
that the
good.
Miz managed to find a way to make it work. Because the Miz makes it work.
Well, the thing is, if you did it, it would actually really hurt somebody, but that's the problem.
Yeah, like it definitely is one of those moves that seems like it's going to hurt somebody more than it actually looks like it does. Like the Miz,
You have to pull it because if you actually did it, yeah, you would just slam their face into the floor and break their face.
Yeah, it's funny because the Miz was in a similar situation to Jericho, where he just could never find a finish his whole career, and then somehow the stroke was the answer for him.
Yeah. So next up, we cut back to Trish's locker room, where, as we mentioned before, Test comes in while she's in just a towel and teases forcing himself on her, but she kicks him out. This was really weird and gross.
This is not the
I
only
know
time this happened.
No, did he make a habit of this?
With not just Trish either. Like he just sexual assault guy Test is just a thing that happens until he eventually abducts Stacy Keibler, and then he and Scott Steiner start a feud about it.
Oh, that was a really weird. Oh, Scott Steiner's so bad. Oh man. Yeah, I mean, as we said before, this is what giving someone immunity from being fired would probably actually lead to.
Yeah, like, oh, I can't get fired. I'm a sexually harassed everyone.
I'm gonna become a sexual predator.
Oh my god, it's so true.
Oh. So next up for the World Championship, The Rock defends against Chris Jericho. Rock won the WCW title from Booker T at SummerSlam. He lost it to Jericho at No Mercy. Jericho's first world title win, a huge breakthrough. At the time, it felt like, oh my God, he finally got the title. He had been with the company for 2 years at that point, but it's just sort of how the booking was back then.
Right. It only lasts 2 weeks.
Yeah, he loses it back to Rock on Raw, and then he just sort of slowly turned heel over the course of the fall while feuding with Rock. And now he's 100% heel after walking out on Team WWF at Survivor Series.
It really was a great heel turn. Like it's the whole thing is predicated on the idea that like Jericho had to win the big one, and he's so resentful of The Rock for basically just being a version of him that can win the big one. And then finally he does win at No Mercy, but he wins under dubious means, and then he loses it back again, and he just starts this slow burn where he's just like, fuck The Rock, this is fucking bullshit, I'm a big star, this is ridiculous. And then we get to this point, and like now he's full heel, but mostly he just hates The Rock.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite versions of Jericho with the ponytail and like the really obnoxious goatee. Just such an unlikable shithead.
Yeah. This is a great heel character. It would have been a great heel foil for like a top babyface. But this character, there's just something missing from it. Like this character was not ready to be the top star on the show.
You know what he needed? He needed Stephanie McMahon, not just as his manager, but as his girlfriend.
If he had just nailed Stephanie McMahon, that would have been everything.
Think of how much hotter that feud with Triple H would have been if he had handcuffed Triple H to the top rope and instead of knocking him out with the sledgehammer, had made out with Stephanie in front of him.
That would have been genius. And I just don't understand why they never took that step, because things were so personal between Triple H and Jericho, and they were so personal between Stephanie and Jericho that it just would have been such a shocking, oh my God, are you serious moment?
Yeah, well, because he always wanted to be Triple H, and like you could do fun stuff, like he starts dressing like Triple H. He starts wearing leather jackets and like denim vest over. Like it would be kind of campy, but it would be hilarious.
Like they could have gone so far with it.
He's trying to learn to spit the water like Triple H does,
and instead they go with him picking up poop.
Yeah. This is a pretty good match.
The Rock and Jericho have unreal chemistry together. Everything's so smooth.
They fight out on the floor. They go to the announce table. Jericho goes for the rock bottom. Rock instead DDTs him through the table. They go back in the ring. Jericho blocks the rock bottom, hits the breakdown, can't get the pin, goes for the people's elbow. Rock catches his leg. Sharpshooter. Jericho rolls through into his own sharpshooter. Rock slips out. Rock bottom. Vince tries to interfere. Rock beats him up. Rock pulls him into the ring. The distraction. Jericho hits a low blow. Rock bottom on the Rock and gets the pin. Of course, Jericho can't win with his own finisher. Wouldn't want to put it over.
Yeah, which is fine because his own finish sucks. Like, I almost wish that he had just started using the rock bottom as his finish. Like, in this period of time, it almost wouldn't have even felt weird.
Could have started doing the pedigree. Again, going back to things they should have done with Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins should have also been Stephanie's new boy toy.
Yeah. Boy, they just had, like, I can think of at least 10 times during the last 20 years where somebody banging Stephanie McMahon would have made everything better.
They'll never do it because they know that the fiction becomes reality.
Yeah, that's a good point.
People
like Triple H is like, hey, the last time she banged somebody in storyline, it was real.
And that's why he's the cerebral assassin. I mean, that's how they got together in the first place.
That's a really good point. Fucking China has alarm bells going off in her head like, wait a minute!
Yeah.
And then the most heelish thing in the world happens to the heel.
Yeah, so Jericho's down and out, and Austin's music hits, and Austin comes out fresh as a daisy, ready for their match. This is so backwards, but they correct it by having Angle run out and beat up Austin with a chair.
But even so, like, it's just, there's that moment where, like, Jericho's, like, beating the shit and the glass breaks, and you're like, oh, poor Jericho.
Yeah. So then Rock comes back and hits Jericho with the rock bottom because he's got to get his heat back.
And it's like, what, are we going to have a match? Or, like...
They just both out. No, they can't continue. They fight on the floor. Austin pulls up the mats. Jericho clears the announce table. Jericho blocks the stunner. Austin blocks the walls of Jericho. They go to the ring. Jericho puts Austin's shoulder into the post. Walls of Jericho. Ref gets bumped. Scumbag referee Nick Patrick is brought out by Vince.
Okay, hold on. Let me just point out my experience with this match is, if you were a fan of wrestling during this era, there was the ability to watch the pay-per-views on WWE's website. But their website was so shitty at the time that it was like a flash player, and it would just buffer and go down constantly. It only cost $5 to watch because they didn't think anybody was actually going to try to watch the pay-per-views that way. But it's all I could afford. So I'm sitting up in my bedroom on a laptop watching this pay-per-view as the biggest Jericho fan in the entire world, wearing my Jericho shirt, surrounded by Jericho pillows and shit, like just Jericho everywhere. And at this point, the feed cuts out. Everything else that he's about to describe, I'm listening to like it's on goddamn radio in my room, freaking the fuck out because there's no way Jericho's actually going to win, is there?
I don't think I've ever been more shocked by an outcome than Jericho winning the title this night. I had never even considered the possibility that would happen.
Like, even as the most diehard Jericho fan, I thought easily he was going to be eliminated first. Like, he didn't even seem like he belonged in the company with the other three. Because, like, Jericho's last title shot before this, and I mean the real title, is King of the Ring in a triple threat match. Like, it's not, he wasn't treated that seriously during this whole period.
No, and instead he ends up walking out with both the belts, and it kind of killed him in the long run, it turns out.
It was too much too soon. Sometimes getting that belt when you're not ready for it is worse than never getting it at all. Ask Jack Swagger.
Oh, that World Heavyweight title killed so many careers over the years.
Yeah,
they gave that to so many guys before they were ready for it. Vince brings out Nick Patrick. Ric Flair cuts him off and beats him up. Vince and Flair go at it. Vince gets the advantage. Austin comes out and beats up Vince. Austin puts Jericho in the walls of Jericho, and Jericho taps out. Everybody has had their finisher stolen tonight.
Yeah, it was just such a thing during that era. You just never see that these days. Like, it would just be so funny to see, like, Brock Lesnar do the spear on Roman Reigns and people get so offended. Roman Reigns do the F5.
It was just one of their go-to easy pops. I mean, same thing with crowd brawling announce table. It's just part of the formula for a main event in this era, which normally the main events were excellent. But yeah, I mean, it's like, we're going to fight on the floor. We're going to go in the crowd. We're going to come back, do our announce table spot, get back in the ring. Referee's going to get bumped, interference. We're going to steal some finishers, and then we'll go to the finish.
The interesting thing, too, is, like, the finishers weren't really kicked out of as much during this period as they are now. Like, that wasn't really part of it. There was just always something there to protect the finish, whether it was, like, the ref bump or something like that. Like, it's just interesting that, like, everybody's doing, like, 50 finishes and other people's finishes and all this stuff. But, like, it's not killing the finishers that they're doing it. It's just kind of funny that way.
Booker T runs in from the crowd and hits Austin with the belt. He runs off. Jericho covers. Vince throws Hebner back into the ring, and Jericho gets a really slow 3 count. I wonder if they screwed the timing on this up, because I was surprised Austin was willing to do this.
Is this the most interference you've ever seen in a WWE match?
It's up there. This is super Vince Russo-ish.
Like, everyone is involved in this match. And, like, we understand that Vince really didn't want Rock or Austin to win because of the ass thing, which still is a ridiculous thing to have be the motivation behind your big, gigantic title unification match. But, like, it's ridiculous how much interference is going on here. Like, this does not make Jericho look strong. Like, not even slightly.
No. I mean, nothing. That's the story of his title reign. I mean, they never made. I mean, sure, what is the right balance you need to strike here? Obviously, he's a heel, and he's also going to be, a chicken shit heel champion. But how weak is too weak?
Like, I think cheating to win is obviously the right way to go, but, like, he's got to do it himself.
This is always my thing: is give him some guys that he's in charge of, and
right.
they interfere for him, and he's calling the shots.
Like, this is all about Vince. Like, Jericho's just there, which is unfortunate because it should be about Jericho. Like, a good example is the Royal Rumble match that he's going to have with The Rock, where The Rock is looking past him as a transitional champion, and Jericho gets super pissed about it. That's a great feud, and it winds up being a great match because Jericho basically finds every way to cheat imaginable, and then wins.
Exposed turnbuckle, grabs the tights, feet on the ropes, all at the same time.
But that's genius, because that's a chicken shit heel who finds a way to cheat and win, but it's still Jericho doing it.
Yeah.
It's Jericho winning. That's the only time during the entire reign where that happens.
Yeah. And this ends up being one of the worst title reigns in history, I would say.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. It has one good match and a whole bunch of bullshit.
Yeah. At the end of this, he is a fraction of what he was at the beginning.
Yeah. The WrestleMania main event flopping as hard as it did, and it did, no matter what anybody says, basically threw Jericho into the main event until he had to leave the company and come back to get past the stigma. Like, that's how bad it was.
Yeah, I mean, he never recovers from it during his initial run. During the next 5-6 years, he spends floundering in the mid card to varying degrees.
Yep. Where the highlight of his run is a game of musical chairs. That's awesome. Good for him.
Yeah. So, I mean, show ends with Jericho winning. Nobody could believe it at the time, but yeah, Chris Jericho is the undisputed WWF champion. Not a particularly good show here. Kind of remarkable it could be this kind of flat with everything they had going on and all the talent they had.
Absolutely. Like, it's no wonder why people stopped watching, and it's just such a shame, because I know that if Vince had it all to do over again, he would do so much of this shit differently.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that he wouldn't tell you that, because that's not the kind of thing that Vince says. But there's just so much shit here where they just went with stuff too fast, or they blew right past stuff that had potential, or they should have gone left and they went right instead, and they'll never know what's down that other path. There's just so much of that here. And like, with the benefit of hindsight, we can be like, well, this is all stupid garbage. They should have done something else. But man, if you were watching during that time, like, stuff was just happening so fast, and there was just so much. It was just too much. Yeah.
And they still end up doing pretty good business for the next, couple years. It's a downward trend, but they're coming down from such a high that they still do pretty well. But they even with losing Rock and Austin, they could have had a much better run than they ended up having. They just don't put things together in time.
Yeah. They spend 3 years desperately searching for the successor to The Rock. And by the time they find it, it's already too late.
Well, they have Brock Lesnar, and he turns out he doesn't want to do wrestling, and that was a big setback.
And they have Randy Orton, and they think he's the guy, but he's not.
He wasn't. I mean, even as they dropped the ball on him, he wasn't.
They have the 55 people they attempted to push on SmackDown.
Bobby Lashley.
From Lashley to Kennedy to MVP and beyond.
Yeah.
And just none of it until nothing works.
Yeah. We didn't know how, I mean, even as we complain about it, this is still better than what was to come.
Yep.
So I don't know. I think that kind of wraps us for Vengeance 2001. What a weird time.
God, yeah. It's just so funny to think about, because I remember I was 16. I had sort of pretty recently come back to wrestling. I was a big time Jericho and Van Dam fan. I was a total mark. And like, this was such an exciting time for me in wrestling that it's hard for me to think about it as negatively as it deserves. Because it's just like, oh my God, cool. Something new and shiny happens on every single episode of wrestling. It's crazy. New people coming in. Who's Ric Flair? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how I was feeling. Not good, because I was such a big Austin fan, and they had so totally destroyed him by this point. He is so much less than you realize. A year before this, he had just come back from his injury, and he was so hot from that. Yeah. And they do just the most ill-advised heel turn in history.
Yeah, they really do. Like, I vividly remember, like, the momentum of all of this is going to run out around January for me. And it's just going to be like, God, this kind of sucks. Like, nothing works right, and it's all weird, and everything sucks, and Jericho sucks. Everybody sucks. Like, they had me all through 2001. And like the second 2002 starts, I'm going to pretty much be like, bleh. It's going to turn me into a smark by the end of the year.
The one thing for me was when they brought in the NWO, that was that was about as excited as I've ever been.
I'm going to kill it with a lethal dose of poison.
That was such a great reveal when he realizes it's been the mirror the whole time, and he spins the chair around, and it says NWO on the back.
Genius.
I'm like, okay, the NWO is going to be the invasion done right. And of course it wasn't. Nothing went right for them in these years.
Man, what if they just wait until 2000 until they get the NWO and the NWO is the invasion? Like they don't even worry about WCW. They just have it be the NWO.
WCW is a dead brand, but the NWO is forever, brother.
There you go. Everybody comes in wearing the black and white.
Ooh, Eric Bischoff's dream come true.
I know, right?
All right, so I think that wraps us for Vengeance 01. I mean, I wouldn't really tell anybody to go watch this show. If you're hankering for something, go watch the Van Dam Undertaker match because that's something different than you'll have ever seen before.
Yeah. I mean, this seems like it's going to be a cool historical moment in time. Like that's the reason like people like us do podcasts about it. That's the reason like when you're stumbling through WWE Network pay-per-views, you're like, oh, hey, title unification. It's not though. It's not a moment of time that meant anything to anyone except Jericho, who would brag about it for years later, but it almost killed his career. So honestly, don't bother with it.
Yep. So that wraps us. Next week, we've got a disaster of an entirely different dimension. It's ECW December to Dismember 2006.
Lashley, Beaumaye, Lashley, Beaumaye.
Oh boy, we'll talk about how Paul Heyman wanted CM Punk to tap out the Big Show in 2 minutes.
Yes.
We'll talk about the Hardy Boyz against Eminem and a bunch of other matches that weren't announced for the show.
Yes, we'll talk about the single most travesty. Like they actually attempted to make people pay for what was not under any circumstances worth money.
They got almost 100,000 people to buy that garbage.
I was like one of them.
It was like an experiment to see how bad a show they could get people to buy.
Next week I will share my experience of paying full price for pay-per-view, watching it alone in my friend's basement in the dark by myself, and the experience of the end of it, how I felt.
Oh man. It's December to Dismember 2006, the show that single-handedly killed WWE CW.
It sure did.
There's a lot to look forward to next week, so you'd better come back for that.
Lashley.